Hello, is this Catherine? Can you come over for a bit? It was a call from Michelle, my husband's younger sister. She sounded panicked, really on edge. Michelle's house is just a short walk away. I got it, I'll head over right now. When I arrived at Michelle's, I was led to a room full of buzzing bees. What the heck is this? When I opened this cardboard box, they just came flying out. I figured we had to call Michelle's husband, Bob, who was at the coffee shop, so I dialed him up. Talking in a room full of bees seemed like a bad idea, so Michelle and I stepped outside. The three of us gathered at the front porch. I then asked Michelle. So, Michelle, why do you have that box of bees in your house? I don't know. I just picked it up because it was left in front of my house. That can't be. That box was sent to me from my daughter, Emily. My name's Catherine Jones. I'm a 65-year-old working part-time at a local supermarket. One thing that hasn't changed since I was a kid is my love for stuffed animals and teddy bears. Growing up, we didn't have much money, so I couldn't often get stuffed animals or teddy bears. But now that I'm an adult, every time I travel or go out, I buy a teddy bear. Collecting them has become my joy. The person who indulges this childlike hobby of mine is my husband, Larry Jones. Larry works at the town city hall. About a year ago, there was a teddy bear I desperately wanted. It was a limited edition online item, a collaboration between a popular brand and character. However, I had never shopped online. I was gonna give up on getting it. That's when I was talking to Larry about it. Leave the online shopping to me. We recently started ordering things online at my workplace. Really? Yes. So, I'll order it for you. Oh, Larry, you're always so reliable, thank you. With that, Larry promptly took out his laptop and showed me how to order, helping me through the process. Whenever I had troubles, Larry was always there to help. After that, I began to order everything online, from daily necessities and groceries to even teddy bears. Around December of that year, the supermarket I worked at entered its busiest season. Being an experienced person at the job, I started working almost every day. With that, I had limited time to pick up items I'd ordered online. Larry was even busier. Because of this, I decided to reconsider how I received my deliveries. Recently, I learned that there's a way to have my packages left by the front door. Even if no one is home, they'd leave the package at the front door. So, from then on, I've primarily been using this service for my packages. Just the other day, while I was on break at work, I received an email from the delivery service. It was a notification that my package had been delivered. I'd received similar emails many times before, so it was same as usual. I noticed something odd when I got home later. Entering the gate of my house and arriving in front of the door, I looked around at the ground. But the package that should have arrived wasn't in its usual place. Thinking of other possibilities, I stepped back outside the gate. Strange. I muttered. The sound of crows echoed in the sunset-colored sky. Larry hadn't returned from work yet, but it was about time he'd be coming home. With dinner to prepare before he got back, I decided to put the delivery issue aside and went inside. Once I began cooking, I got so focused on the task that I completely forgot about the missing package. The following days were busy with house chores and work, and I hadn't found the time to address the undelivered package. Then, on a Sunday morning that weekend, while watching the news, Larry said, "I'm in the mood for that omelette." That omelette refers to one from a cafe we often visit. That cafe is run by Larry's sister, Michelle, and her husband, Bob, is the chef and owner of the place. Both of us, having a rare day off, decided on a whim to visit that cafe. Larry suggested, "Would you like to go that cafe?" "Sounds good, let's go." I agreed. Though we call it our favorite spot, we only go about once a month. Usually, it's when either Larry or I express a desire to visit. That's because Bob's omelets are exceptional and one of Larry's favorite dishes. That day, like many others, we decided to head over to that cafe. The cafe is just around the corner from our house. Under a cloudless blue sky, the two of us walked towards the cafe. Upon opening the door of the cafe, a metal doorbell jingled. Welcome! Hey, here you are! Thanks for coming in, please take a seat at the counter. We were guided to seats right in front of the kitchen counter. Well, both of you together. How are y'all doing? As always, we're doing well. Even though there were only 4 people inside, the atmosphere felt bustling. I really love this cheerful vibe, thinking this place is wonderful. Bob, can we get 2 of the usual? Leave it to me. With that, Bob began cooking. He skillfully cracked and whisked 4 eggs, pouring them onto a pan and shaping them. He served them onto 2 plates. Lastly, he added some Italian parsley and passed it to Michelle. Here you go, 2 servings of omelets. This is so delicious. I've had it many times and know the taste, but it's the kind of dish I suddenly crave and it's always delicious. After we finished eating, we were served coffee. This dish is always so tasty, isn't it? Thank you. With that, Michelle sat across the counter facing me. That's when I noticed something. Michelle was wearing earrings that looked just like the ones I'd ordered online. Without thinking, I was like, Michelle, those earrings are so cute. Where did you get them? Michelle replied with a smile. Oh, really? Thank you. I got them online. Yeah, online shopping sure is handy. Michelle nodded and said, Yeah, that's right. But when I'm running this cafe all the time, I hardly get back home during the day. I don't even have time to receive packages. Well, how about asking to have your packages left by door? Michelle looked a bit surprised and asked, Is there such a thing? At that point, I decided to explain the concept of the service in detail. As I was explaining, I recalled and shared my own experience with it at home. It's a good service, but sometimes there are mistakes. There have been a few instances where I haven't received my packages even though I've paid for them. I really should call the courier company about it, but I just haven't had the time. Michelle responded empathetically. Oh, I see. So, that happens. I took this moment to check a status of my packages to be delivered. At the top of the list, the limited edition teddy bear I ordered was shown as preparing for shipment. I pointed it out to Michelle and said, Look, Michelle. It says it hasn't been delivered yet. Then, I pointed to the second item which read delivered. It was a cosmetic product. I said, This should have already arrived at my place, but it hasn't. That's strange. I hope you find it. At that moment, I looked over at Larry. Larry and his friends were having a different conversation, but soon they joined in on our topic. Well, guess we should just wait for it to be delivered someday, he said with a carefree smile. Larry's always been such a laid-back guy, he doesn't seem to take things too seriously. We continued our casual chat for a while before leaving the cafe. On the way home, I impulsively checked the delivery history on my smartphone. Nothing had changed, most of the packages were marked as delivered. I wondered why it hadn't arrived and thought of various possible reasons. Maybe the local post office was holding it, or it got delivered to the wrong house. I was pretty sure no one in my neighborhood would just take a package left outside someone else's door. Right now, I was mostly concerned about whether that limited edition teddy bear would be delivered as promised. Whether or not I pursued the issue would depend on if that teddy bear arrived. That's what I was thinking to myself. 2 days had passed since I went to the coffee shop. Right after work, I eagerly checked my smartphone. At last, the delivery status of the limited edition teddy bear I had been longing for read delivered. I quickly changed out of my work clothes and started to walk home faster. Once home, I looked for the package. But I couldn't find a box anywhere. I still hadn't figured out why the package hadn't arrived at my place, and I was getting pretty frustrated. Up until now, the only items that hadn't been delivered were cosmetics and condiments, so I wasn't in a rush. But this time was different. The teddy bear I had been eagerly waiting for, which was supposed to be part of my collection, hadn't arrived. I decided to get to the bottom of this. That evening, I talked to Larry. I didn't receive the teddy bear that was supposed to arrive today. That's bad. How many times has this happened now? Probably about 3 times. Something's not right. Oh, I'm gonna call the post office now. Let's do that. I called the nearest post office. But as expected, no good news. The delivery man answered the call. I can't find the package you said you left at the door. Really? I'm sure I left it right in front of your door. I thought maybe you still had it. What's going on? Well, there's a possibility someone stole it. You might want to file a police report. Thanks. I'll think about it. Both of our spirits seemed to sink. For some reason, I felt sorry for the delivery man too. Even if I wanted to file a theft report, I didn't have any solid proof, and I was hesitant. That's when Larry said, "Let's ask Emily. She might know a solution." Emily is our daughter, who turned 40 this year. Now, she's married and living in her husband's house, seemingly swamped with chores and work every day. Thinking it might be easier to discuss with my daughter Emily, I decided to ask her for advice. Hello, Emily? Hey, it's Emily. What's up? I've been having an issue for the past month. The packages I've been expecting haven't been arriving. I thoroughly explained to Emily the situation with the recent missing deliveries. Of course, I also mentioned that the delivery guy was certain he had dropped them off. That sounds like someone might be taking them. I thought so too. What should I do? If your packages are being stolen every time, I've got an idea. She chuckled a bit and then came up with a wild suggestion. I'm gonna send over a box of bees. If we leave it out for delivery, maybe we can catch the thief red-handed when they open it. What do you think? To be honest, the idea seemed way too bold, but it might be worth a try. Can you really do that? Don't worry about it. We have a huge swarm of bees back home, and this might just help us catch the culprit quickly. I was skeptical but hopeful, so I waited for the bee-filled package. A few days later, after work, I checked my phone and saw that the anticipated delivery had been made. When I got home, just like always, the package was nowhere to be found. I wasn't sure if this was a good or bad sign, but there was nothing I could do about it. Honestly, I was about to give up. At that moment, my smartphone buzzed. It was a call from Michelle. Hello, Catherine? Can you come over for a bit? Her voice sounded urgent, almost panicky. Michelle's place was just a short walk away. Sure, I'll be right there. When I got to Michelle's house, she led me to her room. And to my surprise, the room was filled with bees flying everywhere. Oh my gosh, what happened? When I opened this box, this is what I found inside. First, I was shocked to find bees buzzing all around the room, and even more shocked to find out that Michelle was the culprit. I had been told by Emily that bees don't sting at this time of year unless they're provoked. So, I had been stung yet, but I was not sure about Michelle. I thought I should call Bob, who should be at the coffee shop, so I dialed his number. Thinking it'd be difficult to discuss in a room full of bees, Michelle and I stepped outside. The three of us gathered at the front door. I then asked Michelle. So, Michelle, any idea why there's a box of bees in this house? I have no clue. I just picked up and opened the box that was outside. That can't be right. That box was sent to me from my daughter, Emily. I told you, I don't know. Michelle, did you steal it? I said no, didn't I? Michelle raised her voice. If you say you didn't, mind if I take a look inside? Maybe other stolen stuff might pop out? No way. Let me check the room quickly. Saying that, Michelle went into the room, not letting me enter. I had no choice but to wait outside. What's going on here? I had ordered to have my packages left by the front door and it never arrived these days. I talked to my daughter about it possibly being stolen, and that's why she sent those bees. As I was explaining to Bob, we heard Michelle scream. She probably got stung by a bee in her panic. Michelle came out looking disheveled. She was like, "The room's a mess with those bees flying around, so I'd appreciate it if you'd head home for today." She indicated that she wouldn't be letting anyone in her room today because of the bees. Then, an unfamiliar person approached us. It was a beekeeper named Oliver, a friend of Emily's living nearby. After a quick introduction, Oliver said, "Emily asked me to help with the bee situation. Is it okay if I handle it here?" "Yes, please. We'd appreciate it." While Michelle was flustered, Bob and I led Oliver inside the house. While waiting for the bees to be collected, we continued talking outside. "I guess we'll be able to check the room today. But I've only got stuff I bought. There's no point in checking." Michelle was suddenly very assertive. She probably intends to insist that everything in there was hers. 30 minutes later, Oliver completed collecting 900 honeybees. 900. Shocked by the sheer number of bees, the three of us entered the room. I took a quick look around the room. Then I started searching every corner. To my surprise, I found daily necessities like the fabric softener and cosmetics I had ordered scattered here and there. "So, you've been taking all of these too, huh?" "No, I told you." I showed her the order history on my phone that had those products listed. "You still gonna deny this?" "Well, there's a chance we just bought the same things, right?" I was slightly exasperated, but I didn't give up. I searched for that teddy bear. And, near the edge of the sofa, I found a familiar-looking teddy bear. "Is this teddy bear also one you bought?" "Yes." I knew this teddy bear was a limited edition and each had its own serial number. So, I checked the number for my teddy bear on my phone and compared it to the number on this one. Both had the same 5-digit number. "This teddy bear is mine. See? It has the same number." I showed it to Michelle and Bob. "I didn't know modern stuffed animals could do that," Bob muttered. Michelle just sat on the sofa and looked down, silent. "So, it was you who was stealing from our house every time?" "Yes." Michelle's voice grew heavy. "What did you take? You haven't been using them all this time, have you?" "I used a bit of the toner and some imported seasonings." "Why would you do something like that?" More than being angry about having things stolen, I wanted to know her motive. I was out of money. The amount I was spending exceeded what I had, that's all." "But why spend so much? What did you spend it on?" "Well, Michelle's words faltered. It seemed she was hiding something and didn't want to talk about it. Suddenly, Bob moved quickly and picked up a piece of paper that had fallen under the couch. "Hey, what's this? Don't tell me you've been..." Saying this, Bob showed a piece of paper with numbers and an amount. "I'm sorry, I got really into it." The paper Bob showed was a horse racing ticket. It turned out that Michelle had gotten heavily into horse racing and used the money she saved by using my stolen items on bets. Then Bob dropped another bombshell. "You didn't, by chance, take money from our cafe's earnings, did you?" "Just a little bit." "I knew something was off with the profits. How could you?" Turns out she had embezzled tens of thousands of dollars from their cafe. "I'm so sorry. I promise I won't do anything like this again, please forgive me." Michelle cried loudly, apologizing. But for me, having my cherished teddy bear stolen even once was unforgivable. Her apologies did nothing to move my heart. Bob looked equally irritated. "Turns out, I've been secretly recording our conversation since the bee removal. Shall we meet in court?" With solid evidence in hand, Bob and I decided to file a police report. Bob decided to get divorced with her. After that, charges of theft concerning my belongings and embezzlement in the course of her duties were brought against Michelle. It seemed she was eventually arrested. We were satisfied with the outcome. Bob's cafe hired part-time workers, and sales began to rise steadily. By the way, I was given the opportunity to become the part-time team leader there. Michelle got arrested, I heard. It's for the best. I'm better off without someone like her. Being surrounded by hardworking folks makes me much happier now. Yes, let's keep up the good work. It seems like Bob is already looking forward. From then on, I started receiving packages left at my door. Of course, many new teddy bears joined my collection. Larry and I even went on trips to collect limited edition teddy bears from various places, and every day is blissful, surrounded by all these teddy bears with Larry. Quit nagging me. I'm busy with work and exhausted. Why do I have to take care of my daughter even when I get home? Give me a break when I'm at home. Ever since his promotion, my husband has been coming home late and not taking care of our daughter at all. I keep enduring, thinking it's not good for our family to be torn apart right now, especially for our daughter's sake. Then one day, I found out my husband's infidelity. I was moving towards divorce, but when I thought about my daughter, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the right decision, and I couldn't prepare as I should have. But then, Mom, why did you cheat on Dad? My daughter came home from school, sobbing and slapping my cheek. Listening to my daughter's story, I told her the truth. Aubrey, this might be a complicated story for you, but what do you want to do? I can't forgive Dad either. I'm on your side, Mom. After hearing my daughter's feelings, I cut off my hesitation and finally decided to go through with the divorce. So begins a revenge drama between the two of us against my husband. I'm Karen, 43 years old. Living in a single-family home with my husband, Chris, who is the same age and working in a company, and our daughter, Aubrey, who's in 7th grade. We bought this house just when our daughter entered middle school, and we said goodbye to our previous apartment living. The people in this neighborhood are all kind, and it's a very comfortable place to live. My daughter seems to have classmates around, and she's enjoying her life. At first glance, this life might seem smooth sailing, but I have one concern. It's my husband. Ever since his promotion, he's been coming home very late. Of course, I understand that getting a promotion means a higher position and busier schedule. But it's still too late. In the past, he's come home at 1 a.m. Honey, can't you come home earlier? Aubrey's been feeling lonely lately because she hasn't been able to talk to you. Disappointed with her father's tardiness, I resolved to tell him how our sensitive daughter was feeling, knowing this wasn't good for her. But, quit nagging me. I'm busy with work and exhausted. Why do I have to take care of my daughter even when I get home? Give me a break when I'm at home. He completely refused to accept it. I don't really care if he's cold or treats me roughly since I'm used to it, but it really made me angry when he seemed to find taking care of our daughter a nuisance. However, at that time, I thought my husband was truly busy, so I couldn't say anything more. Unaware of what he was actually doing. One day it happened. Have a good day. As usual, I sent my husband off to work. Even though we're not getting along well as a couple, I make sure to say at least good morning, have a good day, welcome back, good night. But my husband never replies. After seeing him off and returning to the living room, I found my husband's lunchbox on the table. He seemed to have forgotten to take it. Luckily, I wasn't scheduled for my part-time shift today, so after seeing Aubrey off to school, I decided to deliver it to my husband's company. Let's see, Chris's department is on. My husband's company isn't exactly a big corporation, but it's not a small one either. In simple terms, it's an above-average company, and the office is quite spacious. As I was checking the directory to find my husband's floor, Karen? What are you doing here? My husband, apparently just returning from a field visit, called out to me. Next to him was a woman a little younger than me. Probably in her 30s. Until my husband noticed me, the two of them seemed to be talking quite intimately. Are you Chris's wife? Nice to meet you. I'm Natalie. Natalie, the woman who introduced herself, spoke to me. In a way that got under my skin. Nice to meet you. I'm Karen, Chris's wife. Natalie, what's your relationship with my husband? Oh, come on, we're just work colleagues. Right, team leader? Yeah, that's right. I had a suspicious feeling about my husband's reaction, but I thought if I worried about it, I would lose, so I didn't say anything. I had to go home and do the housework, so I handed my husband his lunch and decided to go home right away. But I couldn't help but worry about the relationship between the two of them, and when I looked back a little later, the two seemed to be quite close to each other. I was frustrated and didn't know what to do, so I quickly left the scene and hurried home. Ever since I met Natalie, I couldn't help but worry about something. That is, the suspicion that my husband might be having an affair with Natalie. If my husband is indeed having an affair with Natalie, it would explain why he always comes home late, and I would be convinced by the close distance between the two that I saw recently. However, this is just a suspicion. There's no evidence. Besides, my daughter is still in middle school. When I think about Aubrey, I realize it's not good to make a big fuss about it. I decided to forget about it for now, in order to protect my current life. But it's late. That morning, my husband said he had a company party and went to work. But now it's 2 a.m. My husband hasn't come home yet. I went to bed before the date changed, but I couldn't sleep, so I killed time watching a drama I had recorded. Still, my husband didn't come home. As time went on, the suspicion that my husband and Natalie might be having an affair crossed my mind, and I gradually couldn't concentrate on the drama. At the moment I was going to call my husband to ask when he was coming home, I heard a noise from the entrance. It seemed my husband was finally home. I rushed to the entrance, and there was my drunk husband. "What are you thinking? What time do you think it is? And you're this drunk?" I got angry like that, but my husband kept saying incomprehensible things like my boss was going, drink, and stuff. It was pointless to get angry in this state, so I gave my husband some water and somehow pushed him into the bath. While my husband was in the bath, I began to tidy up his belongings. At that moment, a notification came in on my husband's smartphone. I usually wouldn't care, but I'd been suspecting my husband of cheating lately, so I couldn't help but peek at his phone. Then I saw, "Tonight was so much fun. Let's do it again." Of course, don't tell your wife. I felt a quiet anger and took a picture of the message with my phone. During my break at the supermarket where I work, I sighed heavily. Ever since I peeked at my husband's phone and became convinced that he was cheating, I'd been gathering evidence of the affair, but I hadn't been able to find anything concrete besides that message. The problem was that I was also working at the supermarket while taking care of the house and children, so I didn't have much time to investigate their relationship. Capturing decisive evidence, like a picture of the two together, seemed like an impossible dream. "Oh, Karen, is that you? What's the matter? Why are you sighing like that?" This lady is Ruby, a 61-year-old woman who works at the same supermarket. Ruby is kind and very caring. She's also my neighbor. "Ruby, good to see you. Actually, I decided to consult Ruby about my husband. She might have some good insights." After hearing everything, Ruby said, "That's definitely suspicious. I know people, Karen, who've had this kind of problem at your age. Would you like me to introduce you to a private investigator I know?" "What? But I have this image that private investigators and lawyers cost a fortune." "Don't worry. If it's through me, it'll be cheaper." Ruby told me to do it, and although it was somewhat pushy, I began a full-scale investigation into my husband's infidelity. From that point on, I was living life in the fast lane. On weekends, I met with a detective that Chris introduced me to at a coffee shop near the station, and from there, I reported my husband's movements to the detective every day while I was collecting evidence such as his message exchanges at home. According to the detective, indeed, my husband and Natalie were having an affair. He showed me several photographs as evidence, and there seemed to be no end to it, such as the two of them coming out of the office arm in arm, and going out for dinner together. Until then, I was unsure about getting a divorce because of my daughter, but after seeing those pictures, I decided to divorce and send the two of them to hell. Then one day. It's sudden, but I'm going on a business trip for a week starting tomorrow. "A whole week? Where are you going?" "You've never been on a business trip before." "It's in Nebraska." Tough break." I knew at that moment that my husband was not really going on a business trip. Because I saw in the messages between my husband and Natalie that they were planning a trip to Miami. I immediately reported to the detective that my husband seemed to be going on vacation under the guise of a business trip. The next day, my husband left the house early in the morning. My daughter went to school, and I was doing housework as usual, when the detective sent me pictures right away. They showed the two of them happily sightseeing together. I had never seen such a smile on my husband's face. And next to him, Natalie was smiling happily. All of it should have been for me, the one who should have received that smile, the one who should have been smiling happily next to that smile. I got angrier just thinking about it, and felt like crying. However, these photographs only fueled my desire for revenge. I quickly finished my housework and pulled out the paperwork to change the ownership of the house. With the evidence piling up, when my husband returns from his affair trip, I'm going to confront him with the evidence and kick him out of the house. As I was filling out the paperwork, I heard the front door open. My daughter was home. When I went to greet her at the entrance, she was standing there, looking down. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school?" When I spoke to my visibly upset daughter, she slapped my cheek. My daughter, finally looking up, was sobbing. "Mom, why did you cheat?" "Wait, what are you talking about?" I couldn't catch up with my daughter's sudden words and behavior. As I was confused, my daughter continued. "My friend told me today. Mom, you met a man at the coffee shop near the station last weekend. There's even a picture." The picture my daughter showed me was undoubtedly of me and the detective. "I've been trying so hard because I know you and Dad aren't getting along. But why? Why would you do this?" Saying that, my daughter began to cry even more. It seems that my daughter was mistaken. Thinking that, I told her the truth. "Aubrey, please calm down and listen. Your father is the one who's cheating. The man in the picture you showed me is the detective who's investigating your father's infidelity. Your father is doing something terrible that's not only hurting me but also you. He said he was on a business trip, but it's all lies." Saying that, I showed my daughter the evidence photos of my husband's infidelity. "So that's what happened. I'm sorry for blaming you, Mom." "It's okay. I'm sorry for letting you misunderstand. It might have been a complicated story for you, Aubrey. What do you want to do?" "I can't forgive Dad. He's making you sad, and he's neglecting me, right? I'm on your side." Saying that, my daughter agreed to help me. Of course, I took care of the legal procedures and claims for child support, but she helped me pack up my husband's belongings to throw him out. As we were busy preparing, the day my husband would return finally came. "I'm home. Welcome back." The day has finally come. Today I'm gonna send both of them to hell. "Man, I'm tired from the business trip. I don't usually go on them." He seems intent on maintaining that he was on a business trip, even though it's all out in the open. "Hey, honey. Can you sit down? I have something important to talk about." "What?" "I'm tired from the trip. Can't it wait? Just sit down." My husband, sensing something unusual from me, obediently sat in the living room chair. "How was the business trip to Miami?" "I told you just now. I'm tired." "Wait, what did you just say?" "How was the business trip to Miami?" "That's what I'm talking about. How did you know I went to Miami? I only said I was going to Nebraska." "So you admit you went to Miami?" "Yes. I went to Miami on a business trip. With Natalie, right?" "Why, how do you know that?" I thrust a pile of evidence photos at my flustered husband. Upon seeing them, his face turned pale. "What's this?" "What do you mean, what's this? You should know better than anyone." With that, my husband fell completely silent. "Don't you have anything to say?" "Shut up! You're the one who's disgusting, sneaking around and even spying. That's probably why you're being cheated on. It's not my fault. It's your fault." I was utterly dumbfounded. Not only did my husband admit to cheating, but he also lashed out at me. "Humph, keeping quiet means you admit you're in the wrong." The moment my husband said that with a triumphant face, "Why is Mom wrong? Dad's the one who's wrong," came from Aubrey. And then, "I've heard everything, Chris. You're cheating on Karen, and then you say such things to her." Chris's parents came out from the next room. "Dad? Mom! Why? I called them. It was my daughter who had suggested calling Chris's parents. Chris's parents live in a remote area of Kentucky, so it felt a bit awkward to call them all the way to New York, but we did it, saying, "We're gonna beat the tar out of Daddy." It seems my daughter, Aubrey, is quite vengeful, just like me. For Chris, this was an unexpected development, and it seemed to be quite effective. You lie about being busy at work, you hurt Karen, you ignore even Aubrey, and you go off on trips with other women cheating on your wife. Then you get caught cheating, and you suddenly get defiant? What's with that attitude? Enough of your nonsense. Next to Chris's father, who was yelling at him, Chris's mother, Ruby, was crying. Since Chris's parents appeared, his face had turned pale beyond belief. Serves him right. Call your mistress here right now. But Chris was still frozen in his chair, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. Unable to wait, I forcibly took Chris's smartphone and sent a message to Natalie, pretending to be him. Miami trip was fun. No one's at home now, wanna come over? I had to do it this way, otherwise, she might not come. While I was typing the message, Chris kept shouting at me to stop, but thanks to Chris's parents holding him back, it worked out well. After a while, the house intercom rang. She's here, isn't she? Better go welcome her quickly? She thinks you called her after all. Chris, realizing he had no chance of winning, quietly headed towards the entrance. As the door opened, I could hear Natalie's cheerful voice, "I'm so glad you invited me over. It's gonna be our house soon." I wanted to have a look around. From the conversation, it seemed Chris planned to divorce me, kick me and Aubrey out, and live in this house with Natalie. How stupid can people be? They don't even realize they'll be the ones getting kicked out. Just imagining their desperate faces as they leave makes me want to burst out laughing. Then Chris returned to the living room with Natalie. Even Natalie, who had been in high spirits until now, suddenly looked puzzled as she sensed the heavy atmosphere in the living room. "Welcome, Natalie. Could you please sit over there?" Saying that, I made Natalie sit next to Chris. "I'm sorry for calling you so suddenly. Let me introduce you. This is my daughter, Aubrey. And these two are Chris's parents. You understand why you were called here, don't you?" As I said that, Natalie's face quickly turned pale. She seemed to have finally understood the gravity of the situation. I didn't know that Chris had a wife. He told me he was single." But instead of apologizing, Natalie lied that she didn't know about me and tried to protect herself. Cheaters are just rotten to the core. Thinking that, I immediately corrected her. "You can't possibly not know, right? After all, we met when I delivered Chris's lunch the other day." With that, Natalie fell silent again. After a brief silence, Aubrey came in with the bags of Chris's belongings that we'd packed together, as if to say, "Now's the time." "What's that?" Chris said, seeing the large bag and the big suitcase. "It's clear, isn't it? These are all your belongings. You're gonna leave." "What are you talking about? This house is contracted under my name, so you can't possibly do that." "Oh? Really? You don't know, do you? While you were off enjoying your trip, I changed it to my name. Thanks for giving me a whole week to prepare." "That's outrageous. Aren't we family? How can you kick out your family like this? The person who's been ignoring me and Aubrey all along shouldn't talk about family, should you?" Saying that, I slapped down a divorce lawyer's business card in front of my husband's eyes. "Let's proceed with the divorce through our lawyers from now on." I forced my dejected husband to nod in agreement. My husband, with tears in his eyes, spoke to his in-laws. "Dad, Mom, please. I'll do anything, just let me stay with you until I find a place to live." But they replied, "We don't have room for a fool son like you. Don't ever associate with us again." "That's right. I don't want to think of you as my son. Don't ever show your face again." And with that, my husband was disowned by his family. The discussion is over. Matters like division of assets and child support will be handled through the lawyer from now on. If you understand, both of you leave now. With that said, the two of them got up and slowly headed towards the front door. On their way out, Natalie asked, "Aubrey, was it? Aubrey, why don't you come with us? I'm definitely better than your mom, you know?" I was dumbfounded by this. He had cheated without apologizing and seemed to be trying to win over my daughter in self-preservation. I thought about giving her a piece of my mind, but my middle school-aged daughter said, "There's no way a terrible person who cheats is better than my mom," and that must have shocked her, as she drooped her shoulders and went home. After that, we communicated through the lawyer. My husband begged many times to meet and apologize, but I steadfastly refused. I never want to see or hear him again. It seems that word of this incident spread to their company, and they were both fired right away. As for Natalie, it seems that by deliberately sending the notice for emotional distress compensation to her parents' home rather than her own, Natalie's parents have come to know the whole story. Apparently, she has been taken back to her family home and is now being watched over by her parents. Thanks to that, the two were forced to break up. I received a phone call from Natalie's parents apologizing deeply. My husband, having been disowned by his family and left without a place to go, his whereabouts are unknown to anyone. Well, I'm not interested, anyway. As for me, Mom. Ruby's here. Yes, just wait a minute. Several months have passed since the incident. After I kicked them out, Ruby had introduced me to a private investigator, so I went to report and thank her as well. Karen, you really did a great job. There might be more struggles ahead, but since we're neighbors, I'll support you in any way I can. She said so. Since then, Ruby has been coming to my house often, taking care of various things for us. Aubrey has grown quite fond of Ruby. Since the incident, my in-laws have been very good to us, sending over homegrown vegetables and Aubrey's favorite candies. Raising a child on my own has its challenges, but thanks to the support from Ruby, my ex-in-laws, and others around me, my daughter and I are living happily in our home as usual. Ruby, thank you for always looking after my daughter. It's fine. Aubrey is such a good girl, she's like my own granddaughter. So don't hesitate. What about you, Karen? How's that guy you've been talking about? What? Ruby, that's still a secret. I've made a fresh start. Maybe Aubrey will have a new dad in the near future. Having lost my parents in an accident and grown up in an orphanage, I couldn't find any reason to live or to push forward. Then one day, I received a letter from my mother, who I believed was dead. What's more, the return address was our old family home. This couldn't possibly be happening. But maybe, just maybe. After agonizing for days, I decided to go to the address on the envelope. But as I saw our old home, memories flooding back, I was suddenly overtaken by fear. I decided to peek from the backyard first. I saw a middle-aged couple living there. I squinted for a closer look. Thinking if I didn't recognize them, I'd sneak away. But in the next moment, I couldn't believe my eyes. What? Dad, Mom? I was dumbstruck by this unexpected turn of events. My name is Katie Anderson. I was placed in an orphanage at the age of 10 and left 2 years ago. I now juggle several part-time jobs and live alone in a cheap apartment in New York City. My parents passed away in a car accident when I was 10. During a holiday trip on the highway, we got involved in a multi-car pileup. I was in the back seat, and by some miracle, I survived. But my parents, in the front seats, were killed on impact when we hit a truck. We were returning from a fun day at the water park, a birthday treat I had longed for. While I was dozing off from exhaustion, I suddenly felt a jolt, as if a cannon had been fired directly into my back. The next moment, I found myself paralyzed and unable to move. In that disorienting moment, I desperately called out for my parents. But with no response, I lost consciousness and woke up in a hospital bed. As soon as the nurses realized I was awake, they started bustling around, and soon after, police officers and doctors flooded into my room. All the while, I kept wondering when my parents would come. I asked the nurses multiple times, "Where are Dad and Mom?" But only got vague answers. At 10, I thought they might be in another hospital. However, a few days later, I understood the evasive responses. My mother's sister told me that my parents' injuries were too severe, and they didn't make it. Furthermore, she said, I have a family of my own, and told me she couldn't take me in. I just couldn't grasp the situation. My mother's sister explained things to me in simple terms so I could understand. As a result, I understood that since I had lost my parents, I was going to be placed in an orphanage after being discharged from the hospital. I had many questions about what would happen to the house I lived in and what I would do about school, but I remember feeling a slight relief at the thought of not becoming part of a stranger's family. Afterwards, once my injuries healed and I was able to move again, I was sent to an orphanage instead of returning to my own house. My mother's sister had taken care of my parents' funeral and sorted out their belongings while I was hospitalized, and she had also sent my personal items to the facility for me. We had been exchanging letters while I was in the hospital, so I was informed about these arrangements. To be honest, it felt like strangers had rummaged through my house, and I really didn't like it, but there was nothing a 10-year-old like me could do. Moreover, I never even imagined that I wouldn't be able to return home. I wanted to know why, but I didn't know who to ask or how to convey my feelings. Everything moved forward without my input, and I felt like I was just being swept along. That's how my days went. Even after moving to the orphanage, I'd receive letters from my mother's sister a few times a year, but the content was always the same. How are you? Do you need anything? At first, I wrote back, but soon I ran out of things to say. So, little by little, I stopped replying to her letters. To begin with, I had never met my mother's sister while my parents were alive, so she felt like a stranger to me. Being worried about by someone I felt was a stranger meant nothing to me, and exchanging letters became a chore. Maybe she sensed how I felt, because the letters from my mother's sister became less and less frequent over the years. By the time I was ready to leave the orphanage, I had almost forgotten about the letters and our relationship had become very distant. I always felt as if I was left behind in some unknown world, spending my days in the orphanage. While I was hospitalized, the funeral took place, and I ended up coming to the facility without ever going back home. Because of that, no matter how much time passed, it all never felt real to me. Why am I here? I constantly felt a sense of alienation. As I grew up, this feeling of alienation turned into loneliness. I have nothing left. There's no point in trying since I have nothing. Feeling this way, I lost all motivation. So, when I graduated high school and left the facility to get a job, I couldn't fit in with the work environment and the differences with my colleagues, so I quit almost immediately. After that, I hopped from job to job, but I always felt out of place, and none of the jobs lasted long. The time it took to find a new job kept getting longer and longer, and my already limited savings quickly ran out. I managed to scrape by with day labor jobs, living each day on the edge. I often wondered if there was truly any meaning to keep living in such loneliness. Wouldn't it be easier to just leave my apartment and live on the streets? I thought about it many times, but always backed out at the last moment. If my parents knew I was living on the streets, they would surely be devastated. Even though I knew I'd never see them again, I didn't want to make them sad. One exhausting day in that daily grind, I got a call that a letter addressed to me had arrived at the orphanage where I once stayed. Maybe out of guilt for quitting my job shortly after starting, I tried to avoid any association with the facility. So, I planned to have them discard the letter without reading it. But the moment I heard who sent it, I felt as though I'd been hit over the head with a hammer. Incredibly, the letter was from my mother, who I believed had died in an accident when I was 10. I immediately headed to the facility to retrieve the letter. My mind was in turmoil ever since I got the call. My parents were supposed to have died in an accident when I was 10. That's an unchangeable fact. So, miracles don't happen, and there must have been some mistake with the letter. I tried hard to ground myself and not to escape from reality. But against my better judgment, the impossible hope that their deaths might have been a mistake kept cropping up in my mind. If my mother was indeed alive, why had she left me in the facility all these years? What does she hope to achieve by sending a letter now, after all this time? As the train rocked me on my way to the facility, these questions plagued my mind. However, I couldn't find any satisfactory answers or sort out my emotions until the very end. My head was a mess of confusion, joy, doubt, anger, and sadness, and I felt like I could burst into tears at any moment. By the time I arrived at the facility, after a journey of over an hour, my mind was blank from overthinking. Just see the letter and then decide, I muttered to myself, trying to reassure myself before entering the building. When I collected the letter from the office, I stared intently at the handwriting on the envelope. Without a doubt, it was my late mother's handwriting, and the sender was indeed her. With apprehension, I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 letters, each adorned with illustrations of a character I adored when I was 10. The first letter began, "To Katie on her 20th birthday." The soft, somewhat curly handwriting of my mother filled the pages, making my heart ache and my eyes well up just looking at it. The letters overflowed with memories from when I was born until I turned 10, and my mother's hopes and imaginations of how I might grow and change in the next 10 years. It was just so, her. Trying not to get the letters wet from my tears, I looked up at the ceiling over and over. Still, the tears flowed, staining the paper in spots. After reading the letters, I thanked the facility staff and promptly left. My mind was still in turmoil, and I wasn't in a state to talk to anyone. Riding the train home, I reread the letters multiple times. I kept rereading it, feeling that I might grasp something. And eventually, I concluded that these letters were written before the accident. I wrote a letter to my mother on my 10th birthday to show my appreciation. Probably, my mother wrote this letter combining her recollections of my 10th birthday and her hopes for the next decade. The question was, who sent it? The first person I thought of was my mother's sister. However, we hadn't been in touch for years, and I couldn't figure out why she would send a letter in my mother's name. Besides, the return address was our old home from when I was 10. If it was indeed my mother's sister, she'd probably use her own name and address. Considering how out of touch we've been, it feels unlikely she'd even remember me. So, who else could it be? I drew a blank. The motherly warmth in the letter filled me with both happiness and confusion. What should I feel? What should I do after reading this? No matter how much I thought, I couldn't find an answer. Exhausted from pondering, I stashed the letter in a drawer, deciding to act like nothing happened and return to my usual life. But as the days went by, the existence of the letter nagged at me. I thought about throwing it away, but each time I saw my mother's handwriting on the envelope, I just couldn't. Instead, I considered meeting the sender. After all, I didn't have much to begin with, so there wasn't much more to lose. Plus, maybe, just maybe, I could ask them for some assistance in life. Unbeknownst to me, I might have been hoping that the letter's sender had something to change my current life. On the bus headed to a familiar address, I was gazing absent-mindedly at a townscape that looked nothing like my memories. Where there used to be just fields and woods, now stood a large shopping mall and numerous houses. The station I alighted at had a new bus loop, and even a chic cafe. This is also a world unknown to me, I pondered as I trudged toward the address written on the letter. But a few minutes later, when I turned a street corner, the sight that greeted me took my breath away. It was a residential area that had barely changed from 10 years ago, just as I remembered it. The view instantly pulled me out of the colorless, hazy world I was in, and transported me back to the vibrant world from a decade ago. This was definitely the town I used to live in. And further down this road was our family home. Before I realized, I found myself running toward the house. I was filled with a peculiar sense of relief, like a school kid returning home or a long-lost child. At the end of my mad dash stood my beloved home, just as I remembered it. Indeed, the letter had been sent from this very place. However, once I got to the front of the house, I couldn't muster the courage to ring the doorbell. The fear of the unknown, of not knowing what would happen next, held me back more than the desire to learn the truth. Pondering on what to do next, I decided to first scout out the backyard. I felt slightly uncomfortable, as if I were a thief, as I discreetly peeked into the garden. And there, on the balcony, I saw a middle-aged couple preparing to sunbathe. The man appeared to be in a wheelchair. To ascertain if I knew them, I continued to observe. Amidst their soft-spoken conversation, for a brief moment, the couple looked in my direction. The instant I saw their faces, I couldn't help but exclaim aloud.
"What? Dad, Mom? You're kidding, right?"
Frozen in surprise, the man in the wheelchair noticed me.
"Katie? Is that you, Katie?"
Upon murmuring my name, he suddenly began crying out loud. I, on the other hand, was paralyzed, too overwhelmed by the shocking turn of events. The next moment, the woman, sensing something amiss, rushed out to the balcony in a panic. She ran straight to the man in the wheelchair, trying to comfort him. While sobbing, the man pointed towards me and seemed to be explaining something to the woman. The woman stared intently at me, then suddenly smiled and said,
"You're Katie, right? I have something to talk about. Can you come in?"
She invited me into her home. Although I couldn't grasp the situation, I had many questions too. I silently nodded and was ushered into the living room from the front door. During the introductions that followed, I learned the woman's name was Irene. And the man in the wheelchair was, as I suspected, my father, Andrew. Furthermore, the two of them were married and apparently lived in this house alone as a couple. According to Irene, my father had been in a severe accident and had been in a critical condition, hovering between life and death. I was told I should have been informed about this when I was 10, but I didn't remember it at all. When I told Irene this, she asked,
"How was it explained to you?"
I replied that my mother's sister had told me he was in a desperate condition with no hope of survival. But on reflection, it seemed I only heard that my mother had passed away. If that was the case, why had my father been declared dead? Irene helped me reconcile my memories with the truth for hours on end. As a result, I realized I'd made a massive misunderstanding. After the accident, the 10-year-old me, unable to comprehend my father's unconscious state, had felt rejected by him since he never came to see me.
"Daddy doesn't come to see me at all. I'm sure he's mad because I said I wanted to go to the water park and that's why Mom died."
At 10, I felt this way and believed my father had grown to hate me. That feeling probably transformed into the memory that both my parents had died in the accident.
I'm just guessing, but I think for the young Katie back then, it was less painful to believe both parents had passed away than to think your father hated you.
Irene said, trying to console me, but honestly, I felt deeply guilty toward my father. Yet, a question arose. I was terrified to ask, but if I didn't, I would regret it forever. Taking a deep breath, I asked Irene,
"Why didn't my father come to get me?"
Irene paused, thinking, and then exchanged glances with my father. Without saying anything, he nodded, and taking that as a cue, Irene began to explain the situation at the time.
Andrew regained consciousness more than half a year after the accident. Half a year.
That coincided with the time I was discharged from the hospital.
Although it was miraculous that he woke up, it took him several more months to fully grasp the situation. Waking up feeling like he had just slept one night, only to realize half a year had passed. It's understandable.
Moreover, my father suffered from post-accident complications, leaving him with many disabilities affecting his memory, speech, and body. The doctors had apparently told him, "Returning to your original life is impossible." Initially, my mother's sister, having heard that recovery was hopeless, proceeded with plans to place me in a care facility as scheduled.
When I came to, nothing was left. I painfully realized the length and importance of the time I'd lost while I was out.
My father said that, with a faint glimmer of tears in his eyes. According to Irene, after being discharged, my father went directly to the disability facility where Irene worked.
There were times he wanted to see Katie but couldn't articulate it. At the same time, he began to mentally grasp the death of your mother, Sophia, so for a while, Andrew was deeply depressed and even had to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital.
My father, having lost everything, had once sought meaning in life amidst despair, just like me. Hearing this story, I felt incredibly comforted. My father hadn't disliked or forgotten about me. On the contrary, he cared about me so much that it drove him to mental illness. In that moment, I felt a mysterious warmth, as if the cold loneliness that had settled in my heart was slowly melting away. According to Irene, even after returning from the psychiatric facility, my father's emotional state remained unstable. Not only did he refuse rehabilitation, but he also didn't eat, couldn't convey what he wanted, and often had behavioral issues like lashing out at staff or throwing things. The staff's approach to my father gradually became more mechanical. Amongst all this, the one who always faced him without a hint of annoyance was Irene. To understand what my father wanted to convey, Irene used handmade cards and whiteboards to communicate with him. Moreover, she would find time for massages every day to ensure his muscles didn't stiffen and even came over to practice conversing. My father once told Irene,
"I see traces of Sophia in Irene. I thought Sophia would be saddened by my pitiful state, which made me feel like I had to pull myself together."
As he said this, he tightly gripped Irene's hand. It was palpable just how important Irene had become to my father. Seeing the two of them, I felt a pang of envy. I wished I had someone to support me in the same way. After that, my father, as if reborn, diligently attended rehab every day and stopped lashing out at the staff entirely. When my father first arrived at the facility, he wouldn't even try to get out of bed. But eventually, he began going to the rehab room on his own, even doing exercises voluntarily. It sounded like a miracle just hearing about it. But the real miracle was yet to come. Thanks to his relentless rehab, my father's condition improved to the point where he could lead a normal life. Incredibly, he was able to leave the disability facility.
Even the doctors were amazed, saying they'd never seen such a recovery.
My father said with a hint of pride. Besides my father, Irene was also smiling, looking genuinely happy. Her smile reminded me so much of my late mother that my heart was wrapped in a strange sense of nostalgia and warmth. Speaking of my mother, I hadn't asked about the letter yet. I pulled the letter from my mother out of my bag and inquired about its origin. But my father suddenly looked down and went silent. Seeing this, Irene stepped in and explained why they had sent the letter on his behalf.
"After we got married, I stumbled upon this letter while cleaning up a room. Andrew had always been thinking about you, Katie, but he felt he didn't deserve to see you. I convinced him that, at the very least, he should send this letter."
With Irene's explanation, all the messy pieces in my head finally came together. It was all a twist of fate. Because of the accident and his disability, my father couldn't come to see me. I had mistakenly thought he was dead. Both of us felt lonely and had been walking through a dim life. However, it was this letter left by my mother and Irene that brought my father and me back together.
"I never once forgot about you, Katie. I've always felt guilty for not being there for so long. I thought if I reached out now, it might be a bother. I'm truly sorry."
Saying this, my father deeply bowed his head to me. After hearing about his past struggles, I didn't feel any resentment. In fact, I was genuinely happy to know he had always been thinking about me. Realizing we both had moments of utter despair at the same time made me chuckle and think, like father, like daughter. When I shared this realization with Irene and my father, they both laughed and shed tears. It was the warmest tears I had ever seen. Glancing out the window, I saw the sunset shining on the balcony. I mentioned,
"I think I'm gonna head out now,"
and stood up. But with a panicked voice, my father intervened.
"Wait! We finally met, and I don't want to let you go again, Katie. I know I may not have the right to ask this now, but I want us to be a family again. Please stay."
As he spoke, tears different from earlier streamed down his face. I was genuinely touched to realize that my father cared so much for me. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the fear that I might ruin the happiness he currently had with Irene. I was torn between wanting to decline the offer and the desire to continue living with my father. I stood there, frozen, unable to answer.
"Hey, Katie. Do you think you'd reject me if I was your mom?"
I stared deep into Irene's eyes, taken aback by the sudden question. Irene smiled tenderly as if she could see straight into my conflicted heart. Not just her smile, but her generous care and attention were so much like my real mother. It felt as if my real mother was pushing me forward. And in that moment, I found the courage to be true to my feelings.
If you'll have me, I'd love to be a part of this family.
Shouting my answer, my father's face lit up with joy, almost toppling over from his wheelchair with excitement. Seeing him like that, I laughed heartily for the first time in a decade. I finally felt I had found a place where I belong in the world. Half a year has passed since then. I'm now preparing fervently to pursue my dream of becoming a flight attendant. And next year, I plan to have the interview. Before coming back here, I lacked motivation and had given up thinking about my dreams and my future. However, when I was able to think about my future again after reuniting with my father, my mother's letter guided me once more. The last line of the letter read,
"What are you up to now? Did you become the flight attendant you always dreamed of? No matter what the future holds, know that your mom is cheering you on."
With my mother's loving words in my heart, I decided to chase after my dreams. And I want to spend peaceful days with my father and Irene.
A woman who just lounges around the house without earning any money has no urgent matters to deal with. Why are you staying at home without doing housework?
My husband berated me when work piled up and I couldn't manage the household chores. In my anger, I left the house and an unexpected turn of events occurred because of something I discovered. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm 49 years old and work as a designer. I design brochures for various lectures and events, and creating posters has been my recent job. I started this designer job 25 years ago, when I had my son and wanted to work from home. Before that, I worked in an office at a company, so I started my design career with zero experience. At first, I didn't understand the specifications and struggled with the design software. I even thought maybe this job wasn't for me. However, a senior colleague at my current company understood my situation and patiently taught me the basics. Back then, remote work wasn't common, but for me, with a newborn, they would share their computer screen online and guide me through various things. Thanks to that, I'm now in a position where I teach my juniors. While handling my own job, I also teach those who, like me, are starting from scratch aiming to become designers. During the day, I primarily work as a designer, and in my spare time, I somehow manage to get the household chores done. I live with my husband, John, and my son, Michael. John, 2 years older than me, is an IT professional. We met through a friend's introduction and bonded over attending concerts of a certain band, eventually leading to our marriage. Michael is now 25, and since graduating from college, he's been working at an insurance company nearby. Both of them seem great to outsiders, and neighbors are often like,
"What a lovely husband and son you have."
But in reality, both John and Michael are far from wonderful in my eyes. Before Michael was born, John was indeed a great boyfriend and husband. But after Michael's birth, when I quit my job, John changed drastically. Once I stopped working outside, John started boasting about his job, saying he's superior since he's the breadwinner, and began spending money recklessly. Even when I began working as a designer, he'd belittle my job, saying any home-based job was easy and anyone could do it, that he was the one doing all the complicated tasks, and he wouldn't listen when I tried to defend myself.
"You, who can't earn much, should be grateful to me and listen to me."
I've thought of leaving him multiple times because of such statements. The reason I didn't divorce was because I thought it'd be better for Michael to have a father. I grew up in a single-parent household without an adult at home. Remembering the loneliness from those times, I didn't want Michael to feel the same. Contrary to my hopes, perhaps due to John's influence, Michael grew up with the skewed notion that men who work are noble and women are incompetent. Though he's well-mannered in public, he often hurls harsh words at me, calling me useless. Despite both claiming they're earning, neither contribute more than $100 to the household each month. John spends his money on drinks, and Michael splurges on clothes and accessories, leaving all household responsibilities to me. I was doing my best to manage the household finances while thinking every day about how to make ends meet. Furthermore, They both used their jobs as an excuse to avoid any housework. I once left chores undone, hoping they'd pitch in, but they ignored dishes piled in the sink and laundry baskets overflowing, forcing me to step in. I taught Michael basic chores when he was little, but now I wonder if he even remembers. This is why I'm left with all the housework. Even though I work too, I considered getting some handy household appliances to ease the chores, but John and Michael vehemently opposed. It was frustrating when they argue that, since I only work from home, it would mean I've hit rock bottom if I also cut corners with housework. No matter how often I explain that being a designer isn't easy, they just don't listen. They seem to think that just because I work from home, it's a laid-back job that requires no special skills. Originally, the reason I started working from home was because John never helped with child raise when Michael was young. Back then, John was hardly ever home, always using work as an excuse, and wouldn't even take a day off when I was sick. Even after work, he'd always go out for drinks with coworkers, claiming it was still part of the job. When I was struggling with child rearing and found out John had somehow arranged a celebratory drink for himself, I was livid. Yet, thinking of Michael, I've continued our married life and started my home-based job. Seeing how Michael turned out makes me want to sigh. I tried hard to instill proper values in him, but in the end, he seemed to be influenced more by the closest male figure, John. Just yesterday, Michael returned home past midnight after hanging out, apparently having had junk food. He even left the trash on the dining table. While I shook my head at his behavior, I started my busy day with tasks like taking out the trash and making breakfast. Then, one day, just before 5 p.m., usual time I get off work, I was suddenly assigned a new project. Initially, someone else was handling it, but the person fell ill, and a request came in for a revision to be submitted by the next morning. Everyone else was occupied, and I was the only one available, so the task fell on me. I usually enjoy flexible hours without overtime, but I decided to buckle down and get to work on this. Luckily, the original person in charge had sent me notes and documents from meetings, and the revision instructions weren't too complicated. Still, revising a design made for a client I'd never met or talked to was quite challenging. I reviewed the styles and themes of past client event posters and websites, making sure to try different approaches without straying too far from their preferences. By the time I felt I was finally done, it was already 9 p.m., and it took me by surprise. Before I realized it, what was once dusk outside had turned pitch black, and I had been so engrossed in my work that I even forgot to eat. At that moment, I heard the front door open. Around this time, it's usually John who comes home. Michael's been out late partying these days, so with that in mind, I pondered what to do next while sending out my data. When I walked into the living room, John was already seated at the dining table, engrossed in his smartphone. "What about dinner?" Without even looking up when he heard me enter, that was all he said. But, since I usually start preparing dinner after I finish work, I hadn't even begun cooking yet. Feeling a bit annoyed by John's attitude, I explained the situation. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day for me, and I haven't been able to prepare anything. I haven't eaten either, so how about we order food delivery?" I said this while making myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, expecting an agreement from John. Instead, a loud thud reached my ears. I looked over to see John, glaring at me with anger, having slammed his fist on the table. "You haven't prepared dinner? What were you thinking?" Stunned by his sudden outburst, I found myself trying to justify my actions. I guess anyone would feel the need to defend themselves when confronted so aggressively. "Well, but you sometimes come home late from work too, right? Today was an urgent task, and there was just no helping it. No matter how regular a job might be with its 9-to-5 schedule, sometimes overtime is unavoidable." I thought that by comparing my situation to that, even John would understand. However, far from calming down, John's anger only seemed to intensify. He raised an eyebrow and began shouting at me. "A woman who lounges around at home without earning any money has no emergencies or responsibilities. What's the point of being home if you don't even do housework?" I always knew John felt this way, but it still angered me to have it thrown in my face so bluntly. He always belittles my job, And I wonder if he thinks of me as just some kind of maid or something. Driven by that thought, instead of my usual attitude, I directly countered him.
You know, I do work and I do get paid. If anyone's loafing around at home, it's you and Michael, isn't it?
For the first time in a while, expressing what I truly felt was a weight off my chest. On the other hand, probably because my words were true, John's face turned beet red in rage and he shouted even louder.
What the heck? You've got some nerve talking back when you're living off my money. That's it, get out right now.
The smirk on John's face told me he was hoping I'd plead with him to stay. Certainly, he was probably expecting me to apologize to ensure I was not kicked out of this house, and to start preparing dinner right now. It was like tactics used by grade schoolers who bully their classmates. My husband says such things to the wife he lives with, and my son shares the same values. After hearing John's comments, I suddenly felt sick of living with such people. Yeah, I got it. I'll leave now. I said that to John, who was smirking, and quickly packed my essential work laptop, some documents, and a few clothes into a bag. In addition to my usual handbag, I put on a big backpack filled with my belongings and headed for the front door. Noticing me, John, seemingly taken aback, hurriedly ran out from the living room. I guess he didn't think I would actually leave, and do so immediately.
Hey, where are you going?
Is panicking the right word? John asked with a voice that was a mix of confusion and urgency. Irritated by that, I sighed and looked back at John. Didn't you tell me to leave? I'm not so foolish to want to stay after hearing that. At my words, John looked regretful but wasn't straightforward enough to ask me to stay, so he just mumbled and remained silent. I turned to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped outside. The words John threw at me were so childish, I almost laughed.
Just remember, whatever happens, it's not my fault.
Ignoring him, I closed the door and headed towards the station. There were a few hotels near our local station. There weren't any events nearby today, so there should be at least one room available tonight. I assumed as much and decided to call a hotel I found online. That day, I managed to check into the first hotel I called. I hadn't stayed in a hotel in ages, and it was nice to see that there was a cafe on the first floor so I didn't have to worry about meals. The convenience of having a laundromat nearby made me feel quite excited. Having missed dinner, I bought a sandwich and salad from a supermarket and ate it in my room. Usually, I'm always preparing meals at home to save money, so the taste of ready-made food felt incredibly delicious. There is merit to homemade food, but you still get tired of a bit making things by yourself every time. My breakfast the next day was simple, toast and scrambled eggs, but not having to prepare it myself made it feel all the more special. After eating, I went back to my hotel room to work. Most hotels these days have internet access via Wi-Fi, so there were no issues there. The revisions I sent out yesterday got the green light from the client, so that was a relief. While working, I pondered what to have for lunch. When I thought about heading out for my lunch break, I noticed a message from John. The message was sent about 30 minutes ago, which was odd since John usually would be at work at this time. It seemed that John had taken time off just to harass me.
You won't have a home to return to anymore.
With those words, he had attached a picture of my belongings scattered around the local dumpster. Around the same time, I also noticed a message from Michael.
Looks like Dad's been clearing out your stuff since this morning. Serves you right.
After checking those messages and pictures, I immediately requested time off for the afternoon and rushed out of the hotel. Many of the items scattered in the photos were work-related books which would cost a lot to replace. Moreover, even though the trash had already been picked up, I thought it'd be a nuisance to the neighbors to have my belongings scattered about. So, I rented a car and headed to the dump. When I got there, just as the pictures had shown, my work stuff, hobby books, and even clothes were scattered without being bagged. I couldn't fathom how someone could lack common sense to this degree. Frustrated, I gathered everything and stuffed it into the rental car. Among the scattered items, I noticed something out of place. Huh? Is this? While puzzled, I prioritized collecting my belongings and continued with the task. After collecting all my belongings, I decided to drive straight to my parents' home. My childhood home is about an hour's drive away. My mother greeted me with a surprised but warm smile. I didn't want to worry her too much, so I hid the details and just asked to store my things, and moved the dumped items into a room at my parents' place. She seemed to sense that something was amiss. Feeling guilty, I left my parents' place. After returning to the hotel from my parents' home, I did some work and then had dinner. There was something truly appreciable about having a meal made by someone else. Moreover, being freed from the day's domestic tasks, my work felt a lot easier. Normally, while working, part of my mind would always be occupied by household chores. Now, without those distractions, I could focus solely on work. Feeling content, just as I was about to drift off to sleep, my smartphone rang out of the blue. As my smartphone suddenly started ringing, I thought it might be work-related, so I answered the call without even checking the caller on the screen.
Hey! You took my treasure, didn't ya? Don't mess with me.
The next instant, Michael's yelling blasted through the phone. It seemed he didn't care about how loud he was being, either because he was so angry or just to annoy me. As the ringing in my ears continued, I tried to comprehend what Michael was yelling about. Then, it hit me. I remembered something. To begin with, Michael's prized possessions were a collection of expensive sunglasses and high-end brand accessories that he cherishes deeply. Each piece has cost several $1,000s, and Michael had about 10 of them. Why would I take them? Didn't I just give you the jewelry box without saying anything a while ago? I used to keep all my jewelry in a jewelry box on the bathroom counter. But one day, Michael took out all my things and started putting his accessories in. I thought it was mine, but I figured it's better than getting complained at for damaging or losing his pricey items. So, I just gave the jewelry box to Michael. If I had any intentions of doing something to Michael's treasures, I would have taken precautions back then. However, Michael seemed to be convinced that I did it and wouldn't listen to reason.
No, it was definitely you. Is this some sort of payback for what Dad did?
I sighed in exasperation at Michael's outrage and how he conveniently forgot his own actions. I decided to share what I saw at the trash dump earlier. By the way, I might have seen my jewelry box at the dump. But I thought it was empty since it didn't have my stuff, so I left it. Upon hearing this, Michael's breath hitched. He probably realized his accessories and sunglasses might still be inside. The jewelry box was something I bought during my single days. John probably remembered it as my stuff and just discarded it at the dump without a second thought. After all, John wouldn't know that the things inside had changed to Michael's belongings.
You gotta be kidding me. What are you gonna do about my accessories?
It was almost midnight, and John should have been asleep by that time. Still, over the phone, I could hear Michael shouting angrily, presumably at John. I felt he didn't care about me anymore, and, annoyed by his immaturity, I hung up. Later, I decided to check out the mentioned trash dump. To my surprise, I found John and Michael arguing there.
It's your fault for being so careless. Getting upset over some jewelry and sunglasses is just ridiculous.
Self-centered John voiced his opinion, to which Michael retorted while stamping his foot in frustration.
What? It's obviously Dad's fault. All of these cost more than $10,000, you know.
Hearing the amount, John started yelling about wasteful spending, creating a vicious cycle of blame. In Michael's hand was a pair of sunglasses with broken lenses, rendering them worthless. The other accessories, which Michael had always kept in pristine condition, were probably damaged too. But John had carelessly dumped my luggage around here, so I bet there are scratches on the accessories as well.
Oh my gosh, my necklace! If it's this damaged, it's worthless now.
Michael lets out a scream-like shout, only to be mocked by John as being too effeminate. Arguing loudly in the middle of the night, I thought it would surely bother the neighbors, so I decided to intervene. Hey, it's already midnight, you know? Can't you consider the people around here? Hearing my voice, the two quickly turned towards me. And then, taking a deep breath, John started yelling at me.
All of this is your fault, Michelle. Why are you standing there so irresponsibly?
Could he genuinely believe that it was more my fault for not doing the housework than his strange actions? I got fed up with that, reached into my bag and began to speak as I pulled something out.
You're the one at fault for tossing someone's stuff without even checking. Enough's enough, it's over.
What I was holding was a document from a lawyer who assists divorce process. After return to the hotel from my parents' house, I had decided to get a divorce right away and had contacted a lawyer at the hotel. Thankfully, I already had my belongings with me. I felt a sense of relief thinking that I just needed to consult a lawyer. Seeing the document, John glared at me, saying something incomprehensible, as if accusing me of trying to escape. But to me, divorce isn't about escaping or anything of the sort. Wanting John to understand this, I decided to reveal a truth I had kept hidden.
Enough already, who do you think you are? I have evidence of all the verbal abuse from both you and Michael.
The truth was, ever since Michael graduated college, I've been documenting the verbal abuse from both him and John. I had hesitated to divorce, but I believed this would be advantageous if the need arose.
You don't have the right to refuse a divorce, John. If you don't want this to go to court, just agree it now.
I was certain that saying this would make John give in. John has always been prideful, and the thought of losing in court would surely break him. It seemed he's realized that, while he had no evidence, I had 3 years' worth of it.
Got it. I just have to agree this, right?
Despite John's reluctant decision, Michael was the one who wouldn't let it go. With a voice full of defiance, Michael ranted on, as if refusing to accept the decision to divorce.
What? Then who's gonna do the chores? I sure as hell ain't gonna do it.
Exasperated by Michael's immature outburst, which resembled a teenage rebellion, it seemed John reached his breaking point.
Enough. Shut up. Stop being so selfish.
Those words, coming from me, were something I'd have liked to throw right back at John. However, within John, there seemed to be a sense of urgency. With this, if I have let my mood sour and threatened to take this to court, it seemed like John would be in trouble. He was trying to silence Michael for the sake of his own pride. Michael, angered by John's actions, headed back home making a fuss. Ignoring Michael, John and I decided to enter a nearby diner to check the document and exchange the lawyer's contact. Even though it was late at night, the diner still had a fair number of young people. I ordered just coffee and wait as John checked the document. He probably wanted to get this over with quickly. By the time I finished my coffee, he'd done, and I stood up with them.
Well then, I'll have the lawyer get in touch with you regarding consultation fees.
I thought it was only natural to say that, but it seemed John hadn't even considered the fees. Maybe he thought he wouldn't have to pay it unless it went to court.
Hey, hold on, are you planning to take money from me?
As John stood up and shouted loudly, the states of those around us pierced through. I was also standing up, holding the papers, so to an onlooker, it must have been an interesting, gossipy situation. I had nothing to hide, so I could have spoken up, but John fell silent, seemingly aware of the states. Suppressing the urge to laugh at John's reaction, I decided to convey just one last thing. Considering the trouble you've caused me, paying the lawyer's fees is only natural. You're an adult, so it's about time you learn to take care of yourself properly. Satisfied that I've spoken my mind, I walked back to the hotel. With this unpleasant problem finally moving towards a solution, I was able to sleep soundly that night. After completing the necessary procedures, I am now officially divorced from John. Thanks to the records of his verbal abuse, I was able to smoothly get divorced with him. I started living on my own and now enjoy a comfortable life. John and Michael are still living together in the same house. However, with me no longer there to support and manage the household, and considering John still pays the lawyer fees in installments, their financial situation seems quite tough. Considering both of them used to spend money recklessly, it's unlikely that this will suddenly change. John seems to be working desperately, but with more of his income going into the household, he's complaining that he can't spend money on alcohol and hobbies. As for Michael, his argument with John at the garbage dump was witnessed by clients of the insurance company, and he lost the trust of the neighbors. Insurance is something you can only rely on people you trust. Even though they used to think he was a nice person, word kept spreading, and apparently, he was encouraged to resign from his job. Michael, infuriated by that, resigned from his job. However, he had no savings and couldn't cover his living expenses. As a result, he's currently working part-time jobs while being caught up in the job hunting process. From the home I left behind, it appears there's no room for maintaining appearances, as the arguing voices of John and Michael echo every day. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying a smooth and delightful life in my solo living arrangement. With the freedom of time that I couldn't easily find while caught up in household chores, I'm even considering exploring new hobbies. Having more time on my hands also allows me to approach work with a sense of ease. I'm now actively engaged in my job with the intention of giving back to the company that supported me. Living these fulfilling days, I truly believe that divorce was the right decision. From now on, I intend to live my life for myself and face my computer with that in mind.
You all smell like piss. It's just unbearable.
Huh, who are you talking about?
What?
Yeah, Grandma. My mother-in-law had a dumbfounded expression on her face. I thought it was a good opportunity, so I started to fight back against my mother-in-law. My name is Kimberly Johnson. I am married and live with my husband, Mike, and our only daughter, Emily, making us a family of 3. I am currently not working and am a full-time housewife, although before getting married, I worked as an office worker at a small to medium-sized company. I feel truly fortunate to have worked at that company because that's where I met Mike. Actually, Mike was also working as an office worker. And it didn't take long for us to become friends. Initially, we would go out for drinks with other colleagues, but as we became closer, we started going out just the 2 of us. Eventually, I started dating Mike, and we went on dates to various places together. As we rapidly grew closer, I found out that I was pregnant with our daughter, Emily, even though we hadn't talked about getting married yet. I was surprised myself to find out that I was pregnant. I nervously told Mike about my pregnancy, and he proposed to me, saying, "Thank you, let's get married." Although the sequence of events was a bit unusual, I married Mike, and then our daughter, Emily, was born, making our happiness even greater. After retiring from my job, I became a full-time housewife and a mother to Emily. With a sense of pride in being Emily's mother, I believe I put in more effort than anyone else in raising her. When Emily was a baby, she cried a lot at night, causing me to lose sleep continuously. However, Mike noticed my struggle and took the initiative to help change Emily's diapers. Mike's proactive attitude and kindness towards child rearing were truly appreciated by me, who was exhausted from childcare. I was once again thankful to have met Mike. As Emily started attending daycare, I realized how quickly she was growing up. So, Emily is now 12 years old. She is in the 6th grade, and her height has significantly increased. Recently, she has been helping with household chores, and Emily is growing into a kind-hearted girl. Surrounded by my loving husband and daughter, I was living a happy life every day. However, one day, Mike said something shocking to me. "Sorry, but starting next week, my mother will be living with us."
What? Why?
My face turned pale as soon as I heard Mike's words. That's because his mother is a bit sarcastic, and I couldn't really like her. It was surprising to think that I would be living with her starting next week. Apparently, my mom has been getting into fights with the neighbors lately. She even had a heated argument with a supermarket clerk the other day. It's strange because this has never happened before. I wonder if she is feeling lonely living alone and wants attention, which is why she is behaving aggressively towards others. Besides, we can't let her cause trouble for the neighbors anymore. So, I decided that my mom should live with us. "Please take care of her, Kimberly." While nodding, I said, "I see, if that's the case, it makes sense." I understand, although I wasn't really looking forward to it. I thought it was indeed dangerous to leave her alone if she became aggressive towards others because of her loneliness. I felt a bit sorry for Mike's mother, who seemed to be running wild due to her loneliness, and thought I should lend a hand. Also, since she adores Emily, I thought there would be many benefits for her in living with us. So, some time passed, and our life living with Mike's mother began. As I expected, she adored Emily and looked genuinely happy when talking with her. Seeing her smile a lot, I felt that her loneliness might have been alleviated, and she stopped causing trouble like fighting with the neighbors. Maybe, as Mike predicted, she was acting aggressively towards others because she was lonely. Starting our life together might have filled the void in her heart. However, even though my mother-in-law seemed satisfied, her attitude towards me remained harsh as always. Well, my mother-in-law has many unpleasant traits, so instead of being direct, she tends to lash out at me by complaining about my housework. I had somewhat expected this, but surprisingly, she showed no mercy. One day, she harshly glared at me, saying the rice I cooked was too hard. I was surprised and responded, "Really?"
Yes. You should try it yourself.
After being told so by my mother-in-law, I tasted the rice, but it seemed just as firm as usual. "No, it's not." However, she persistently said, "No, this rice is too hard." Honestly, I'm disgusted. How can you serve this to Mike and Emily? You're completely unfit as a mother, in a very loud voice. Moreover, it didn't feel like she was going to back down at all. Well, I thought softer rice might be better, so I added water to the rice cooker and cooked it again. To be frank, only my mother-in-law preferred the softer rice. Seeing Mike and Emily with subtle expressions, I sighed. I somehow sensed that I was in a managerial position, caught between my mother-in-law and my family. Moreover, my mother-in-law didn't only complain about the hardness of the rice but also criticized the way I cleaned the floor. Until now, I only used a vacuum cleaner for floor cleaning. Because recent vacuum cleaners, unlike the old ones, have an excellent ability to suck up dirt and dust. Therefore, there was no particular problem with cleaning the floor using only a vacuum cleaner. However, from my mother-in-law's perspective, it seemed unacceptable that I was cleaning the floor with only a vacuum cleaner. So, she annoyingly told me how she used to clean the floor. When I was young, I used to wipe the floor with a mop before using the vacuum cleaner. But you only use the vacuum cleaner without even wiping the floor. You're not really cleaning the floor at all. From today, change the way you clean the floor. My mother-in-law spoke firmly and harshly. I was overwhelmed by her assertiveness and had no choice but to do as she said. Honestly, housework isn't just about sweeping the floor, and this particular task she ordered was quite burdensome for me. However, I didn't want to start a fight by opposing her methods, so I reluctantly began to clean the floor as she instructed. I was sighing as I wiped the floor with a mop. Suddenly, Emily called out to me. "Mom, what's going on? It's rare to see you wiping the floor with a mop." It was a Saturday, and Emily was home because there was no school. Well, actually. So I told Emily part of what happened. Then, kind-hearted Emily offered to help me with the floor cleaning. Thanks to Emily's help, we were able to finish cleaning the floor earlier than planned. However, my mother-in-law showed no sign of helping us, and just sat on the living room sofa, watching television. I sighed again as I saw her just sitting there. She has it so easy, I'm envious. That's what I thought as I looked at my mother-in-law sitting on the sofa, watching television. If she's going to complain about the way I clean the floor, she should at least show me specifically how she wants it done, which would make her complaints more convincing, I thought to myself. However, she didn't do that. Instead, she just complained and told me to figure out the improvements on my own, which was very off-putting. Even though Emily and I were working hard to clean the floor, she could just sit there and watch TV without a care in the world. I couldn't help but think how cold and brazen she was, and I started to get irritated with her. However, kind-hearted Emily went over to her grandmother and gently started a conversation. "Grandma, what are you watching?" To be honest, I was impressed by my daughter's actions. Feeling that I couldn't be outdone, I asked my mother-in-law, "I was wondering too, what are you watching?" However, my mother-in-law said something outrageous to us.
"You both stink! Don't talk to me ever again!"
Her shout echoed loudly in the living room. I was confused by what she meant and asked her for clarification. "Do we smell? What kind of smell is it?"
"What kind of smell?" It smells like piss coming from both of you. It's unbearable.
I was so taken aback by her rude comment. Huh? Whose smell? Huh?
Yeah, Grandma?
My mother-in-law had a stunned look on her face. I thought this was a good opportunity, so I started to fight back. The smell of urine is actually coming from you. If you can smell it, maybe it's time to change your diaper?
Yeah, Grandma, let's change your diaper.
At our suggestion, my mother-in-law looked stunned again. Actually, a few days ago, my mother-in-law had an accident. Somehow, she had wet the floor near the toilet. It seemed that she had tried to hold it in until she got to the toilet but couldn't make it in time. At first, Emily and I thought it was a one-time thing, but after it happened a few more times, we realized it was a serious issue. We somehow convinced my mother-in-law to start wearing diapers. Perhaps because the diapers were so effective, my mother-in-law might have forgotten she was wearing them. Also, the diaper silently absorbed the urine, so she might not have even realized she had an accident. I made this deduction and, considering her earlier harsh comment, everything seemed to add up. However, my mother-in-law didn't seem to understand what Emily and I were saying and just looked puzzled. Soon, she started to get irritated and said something harsh to us again.
You're saying I wet myself? What are you all talking about? Are you speaking ill of me and being mean?
Incredibly, my mother-in-law completely denied the valid remarks made by Emily and me, and instead, she played the victim. However, I felt something unnatural about her remarks. When she wet herself for the first time, she cried so much out of embarrassment. It was unnatural and frustrating that she made remarks as if she had completely forgotten how emotionally shaken she was. Even though Emily and I repeatedly told her the truth and made logical arguments, my mother-in-law refused to listen and continued to paint us as the villains. Eventually, I reached my limit and couldn't help but yell at her.
Mother-in-law, what on earth are you talking about? You are the only one here who smells like urine, so please don't blame us. Also, if you have forgotten that you wet yourself and are wearing a diaper, please check for yourself. Go to the bathroom right now, mother-in-law.
All right. You are so annoying, really. My mother-in-law apparently didn't think I was the type of person to yell like that, and feeling defeated by my forcefulness, she reluctantly went to the bathroom. While she was in the bathroom, Emily said to me, "Grandma is acting kind of strange, isn't she?" Even kind-hearted Emily seemed to think that my mother-in-law's behavior was odd. As I was responding, I heard a scream from the bathroom.
Oh, it's true. I am wearing a diaper and have wet myself. What on earth is happening? Kimberly, please come here quickly, hurry.
Apparently, my mother-in-law had realized in the bathroom that she was wearing a diaper and had wet herself, and she was shocked. Feeling her panic, I brought a spare diaper and handed it to her in the bathroom, averting a crisis. I thought the panic might have been too much for her. But then I reconsidered and felt that it was a good wake-up call, and I felt somewhat relieved. And, my mother-in-law seemed to have successfully changed her diaper in the bathroom, so everything seemed to be all right. My mother-in-law came out of the bathroom looking utterly dejected.
Mother-in-law, that's great, isn't it? You were able to change your diaper and must feel refreshed.
When I said that, my mother-in-law glared at me with a terrifying expression.
What do you mean, great? What do you mean, refreshed? Do you think it's good that I have to wear diapers? You are such a cold person. There is no way you could understand my feelings.
Indeed, I can't understand your feelings at all. As you can see, I am not old and frail, and I am healthy. So, it's only natural that I can't understand your current feelings, right?
Are you picking a fight with me, the mother of your husband, Mike? I can't believe it. Why did Mike marry someone with such a bad personality, this wicked woman?
You are just as wicked. And the world calls people like you wicked.
What? What are you talking about? What part of me is wicked? You are really rude.
I was flabbergasted that my mother-in-law genuinely did not think she was a wicked person. However, there was no sign that she would change her misguided opinion or attitude. So, I had no choice but to yell at her again.
Do you understand? When people say rude, they are referring to people like you. You are causing trouble for our family. But I guess you probably don't realize that, do you?
What are you talking about? When have I ever caused trouble for your family?
Don't say ridiculous things.
Don't you realize it yet, really? I am disappointed in you, mother-in-law. You told me that the rice was too hard, right? You should know better than anyone how off-base that opinion was.
But the rice was hard. I didn't say anything wrong. I just told the truth. How am I causing trouble? Don't misunderstand.
As the fierce battle between my mother-in-law and me continued with no end in sight, surprisingly, it was the gentle-hearted Emily who put an end to it. Grandma, before you came, the rice at our house was never too hard. But since you came, the rice has been like porridge, and honestly, neither I, nor my mom, nor dad like it very much. Sure enough, my mother-in-law was quite shocked to hear such an opinion from her beloved granddaughter, Emily. I threw the final words at her.
Just like the diaper incident, you seem to have forgotten, so I'll say it. It's not that the rice I cooked is hard, it's because your teeth are dentures.
That's right. In fact, my mother-in-law had dentures. Moreover, she had dentures even before I married Mike. Yet, for some reason, the mother-in-law in front of me seemed to have forgotten that she even had dentures. Because of this, she couldn't digest my words properly and screamed.
It's a lie! There's no way I have dentures. It's a lie! You are deceiving me. I'm sure of it. You wicked woman!
Seeing my mother-in-law snapping at me, I sighed involuntarily. If you don't believe my words, check your teeth in the mirror in the bathroom. Surely, that will make it clear who is lying.
Fine, I'll prove that I'm right. In fact, I'm certain I will win. Watch me, wicked woman.
With that, my mother-in-law headed to the bathroom with full determination. However, a few seconds later, I heard her screaming from the bathroom. I grabbed the denture adhesive and, feeling exasperated, headed to the bathroom where my mother-in-law was.
What was the result? It was as I said, right?
Then, my mother-in-law answered weakly. As you said, I completely have dentures. I'm sorry for saying rude things earlier. My mother-in-law, who was completely down and feeling dejected, unusually apologized to me sincerely. Seeing her like that, my irritated heart felt refreshed. I handed her the denture adhesive, and watched as she re-adhered her dentures. Recently, denture adhesives are light and efficient, so my mother-in-law might have forgotten that she had dentures. When my mother-in-law returned to the living room, she apologized to Emily as well.
Emily, I'm sorry for shouting and saying rude things to your mom earlier. Please forgive this foolish me.
Then, the kind Emily forgave her grandmother.
It's okay, Grandma. If you apologize properly like that, it's totally fine. Thank you.
My mother-in-law seemed to be moved by Emily's kindness and shed a few tears. It's okay, Grandma. Let's watch TV together, said Emily, taking her grandmother's hand and leading her to the sofa. I was touched by Emily's hospitable actions towards her grandmother. Children grow up really fast, not just in appearance but also in their words and actions, which made me feel a bit wistful. To override that wistfulness, I said loudly,
Then, I want to watch TV together too.
Sure, that's fine. Let's watch together.
And so, Emily, my mother-in-law, and I spent some time watching TV programs and laughing together.
It was a happy time, and the atmosphere was good.
But then, my mother-in-law suddenly stood up and said this to me. I know I leaked urine, and yes, it does smell. But I don't think it's entirely my fault. What do you mean?
Kimberly, the floor in the hallway in front of your bathroom isn't cleaned properly, so the smell of urine that was stuck to the floor didn't get cleaned, did it? It's wrong of you to blame it all on me. What kind of terrible person are you?
And then, in the same manner as before, my mother-in-law started blaming me again. Honestly, her emotional ups and downs are too intense. I can't make sense of it. Is she the embodiment of a roller coaster or something? That can't be true. I've been cleaning the hallway in front of the bathroom properly, just as you told me to. If you still don't believe me, I'll have you smell the floor. When I said that, my mother-in-law backed down and apologized again. Seriously, how many times is she going to repeat this? But I thought my mother-in-law's behavior was too strange, so I decided to consult with Mike about it. To my surprise, Mike also found many aspects of my mother-in-law's recent behavior puzzling, so we decided to take her to the hospital. We told my mother-in-law that it was for a health checkup, and somehow managed to take her to the hospital, despite her dislike for it. There, she underwent several tests, and the results revealed what was happening to her body. The diagnosis given by the doctor was Alzheimer's disease. To put it simply, it's dementia, but the scary part of Alzheimer's is that it progresses gradually. Symptoms that occur during its progression include becoming suddenly irritable, incontinent, and forgetful. Even after that, my mother-in-law's disease continued to progress, and we eventually had to admit her to a nursing home. She was reluctant to move in, but there was no other choice. Looking at the empty house, I surprisingly felt a sense of loneliness, but also felt refreshed. In the house without my mother-in-law, I, Mike, and Emily were able to spend happy days as before. Moreover, Mike recently got a promotion at work, and his salary was increased. And there's more good news. Emily won an award in a writing contest. Mike and I, being the doting parents we are, started saying things like Emily could become a novelist in the future, as soon as we heard the news. Emily, on the other hand, said, "You both are exaggerating. It's not that easy, you know." But thank you for the compliment, looking a bit shy.
Actually, I have some news to share with you too as well.
What's up? Both of them asked me curiously.
I've found a part-time job. I'm going to start working at a bakery, so I'll be bringing home bread. Mom, that's amazing. Working at a bakery is so stylish. That's great, work hard at the bakery. Sure will.
Laughter filled the living room. I am very happy now.